Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Hard Claim with Viva La Sam. I'm Sam, and this is a show where we talk to people who play Blood on a Clocktower and get their player perspective of the game. And joining us for this week's episode is Habby. Thank you for joining.
It's been an absolute pleasure and a long time coming. We've been trying to get this to happen for a while.
Yeah, I'm really excited that we finally got to do it. Nina says it's Christmas, I guess, based on your background.
Yeah, it's a little Christmassy in here. We got the lights, we got the little tree back there.
Yeah. A goose there, of course.
Yep, goose, the tomato. Yeah, got the whole accoutrement.
Yeah. All right. Well, as usual, we have a script loaded. This is your Rochambeau script. Um, Kind of a staple of yours. This is an updated version. I know it's something you've been going back to work on, but this is the latest version that I have access to. Um, we've sent out
It is the
characters.
latest version, so
Yeah, we sent out character tokens. You've drawn the very central pit hag, central to the script.
yeah. So I mean, Pithag is my favorite character in the game, so there is that too.
Fantastic.
I think that this script is kind of it is my homage to the pit hag because it really does just find a lot of stuff to it. And I know that the script gets a lot of criticism for like having too few bags possible and that like pit hag is a little too essential to the script for it to run. But I've been taking a lot of that criticism in stride and trying to find ways to kind of make the script a little bit more adaptable and not as completely dependent upon the pit hag. So when I drew the token, I was like, come on, Sam. But it turns out that just luck of the draw.
Yeah, I told you before we did this. I don't do Gardener, even for podcasts. I just throw out the tokens and let they lie where they may. That's how I enjoy Clocktower. I think it helps the organic discussion in episode 2, and here we are.
Absolutely.
That's part of the fun of it being completely random is that you completely organically drew the pet hag token.
Yep, it is simultaneously my favorite token to pull, probably, and also the one that's probably the headliner on the script.
Yeah, it worked out great. So in the night, I would wake you up and tell you that your other minion is seat 5,
Okay.
your demon is seat 11.
Okay.
And, we would wake up day 1, and I would let everybody know that this is day 1 of a Leviathan game.
Fantastic.
With that said, if you and I were talking, and I wasn't on evil team, what would you claim on day 1?
Well, I mean, I do think that in very similar vein to SNV, Pithak is a character that you get the more mileage out of it, the more that you can do. Obviously, Vigor Mortis is on this script, but it's not what's in play yet. So we know that for a fact that I can't just kind of be willy nilly and just let myself get killed night 2 and just live on forever. So because of the fact that I know that it's a Leviathan game, and I haven't even talked to my demon yet, um, I do have to prioritize at least staying alive. Which, if anybody has ever played with me in Clock Tower, you know that that is not easy for me to do because I often get executed on day 1. So I do have to kind of play a little bit differently as a pit hag in this script, in that I have to try to get value out of my days so that I can do that. So because of that, I would not want to push on becoming, like a top 4 role or a role that is like a night watchman or something like that. I would probably err towards something along the lines of a gambler or perhaps even an acrobat or something that basically can gain information throughout the game. Acrobat's actually a really good one on this script because it allows for a lot of options for, if you die in the night, or there's some kind of weird shenanigans when it comes to pit hag demon changes and you end up dying because of it. You could say, yeah, I acrobated that person and that's what happened. So, there's a lot of different ways for things to happen that way.
Yeah, great. All right. So, when and how did you discover Blood on the Clock Tower?
Oh, geez. Okay. 20, 2019, 2018. I am a fan of the board game review series, but also most importantly, the podcast, because that was what I could digest at the time of Shut Up and Sit Down.
Mhm.
And Shut Up and Sit Down did a podcast episode in which they mentioned Blood on the Clock Tower, and they said it is um, basically they said it is like Resistance and Werewolf and Mafia, but there is an opportunity for information to be messed with arbitrarily as a balancing mechanism for the game, and that also when you die, you don't you know you're not exited from the game and silenced for the rest of the game, which was always like the most frustrating part of Werewolf for me.
Hmm.
So I was like, wow, those are two huge problems with Werewolf that I like, that I hate, and I don't like that. So they fixed them. Great. How do we fix it? Um, and then 2019, my wife and I went to PAX East, and we mostly went for the video games and stuff, but I mean, and other board games. But I knew that there was a TPI installment there from one of the local storytellers. And I went, and John Jenkset was there. The legendary John Jenkset was there, and I played my first game of TB. I was the butler, and I inadvertently cheated by voting against my master. And as soon as I realized it, player called me out on it, and I was like, "Oh my god, you're right. That's exactly what happened." And I kind of like looked at John, and I was like, I'm kind of sorry. Stone face didn't do anything, and I was like, "What's that about?" And I thought about it, and he's like, "Wait, he would be able to confirm me if he said that I had cheated or something like that publicly." And it kind of clicked on me, and I was just like, "Oh, that's the power of the storyteller in this game." Um, and I was just kind of hooked from there. I built a homemade grimoire. I built two homemade grimoires actually during the COVID era, and then played on TTS a few times before the brain tool came up. That was not great. Um,
TTS being a tabletop simulator.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
the first iterations of playing online in the Connecticut server back when it was just Connecticut players, run by Harrison, our legendary founder, was all on tabletop simulator, and the implementation was not good. But thankfully, that was when Brain came out with the unofficial tool, and we were able to do it that way. And 4 years later, here we are.
Yeah, and still lives on. 'Cause I know CT still utilizes the brain tool or a fork of it that's updated.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. What about the game drew you to it that you keep coming back to it? I mean, it's what, 5, 6, almost 7 years now.
Yeah. God, that's scary to think about.
I
Um,
try not to think about it too.
yeah, it's just like existential crisis setting in. Me personally, I think like for me, the game is still fresh because there is enough of it, and there's enough of, you know, just like with any video game, like the modding community is kind of what keeps video game communities alive. It's why people are still playing Super Metroid 30 years later. Like these things are allowing people to continue to do very innovative things with the game. So um, there is like its own kind of built-in modding, which is script writing for custom scripts. But then there's also homebrew. There's also, you know, um, you know, weird kind of avant-garde kind of adaptations of Clocktower, like Threenseyville and stuff like that. That kind of like use Clocktower as a shell to create a different game. Like there's a lot of really creative people in this community, and when you take all that together, it's allowed this whole thing to create a lot more longevity than you might find with something that doesn't have as many modular parts that can kind of just be plugged in or pulled and plugged and played. um, and again, for me, that's great and all, but generally it's the community. I mean, we have an incredibly inclusive community, an incredibly welcoming and kind and compassionate community in Clock Tower. And as a community leader myself, like that is a thing that we're very proud of our players for being able to allow new people to come in. And it happens all the time still that people will come into one of the major Clock Tower servers and just be like, I just discovered this game because of some celebrity who's playing it or whatever, and we love this thing, I want to know more, and I'm obsessed with it. And instead of gatekeeping, this community by and large is so welcoming and just very inclusive and just saying, we don't care how new you are, let's have some fun. I don't care if I've played TB 300 times at this point, let's play TB again. I love it. It's just there's so much encouragement and love from the players. It's a really heartwarming thing.
Yeah, I ran some in-person clock tower recently, and you know everybody there had played before. We had one guy who had only played 2 to 4 times before over the course of the last 2 years, so he's relatively newer. But most people had played quite a bit at this point. Did a couple games of Trouble Brewing. I said, "Hey, how do y'all feel about doing Sex and Violets?" Not all of them are as familiar with it, so um, probably about 5-10 minutes into Sex and Violets, somebody new shows up. We don't usually have anybody new show up like in the middle of
Cool.
our session, but I was like, well, we did just start a game, but if you don't mind hanging around, we'll after this you can jump into the game. Obviously, I'm planning on doing Trouble Brewing, but yeah, Thankfully, that game ended in a day two clutch win, or clutch loss for the
Yep.
good team. So yeah, it's like okay, well now we're going back trouble brewing. Nobody cared, nobody minded. We got a new player in, who got to experience the game, and yeah, it's really great.
And I think that's a really cool part about this game is that it is a social experience. I mean, I play mostly online just by necessity nowadays, but like when I do get to play in person, it's really exciting. Obviously, I can chill for Final Three Con as much as I want, but like that's the con that I go to. It's the one that I can go to.
So we show
Um,
for it often too.
and it's fine, totally right. So I what I've discovered is that like I made new friends in a new setting at Clocktower or at Final Three Con this year, and um, we played a game in the suite that they were hosting, and I wasn't really super familiar with most of these people. Like I knew some of them, but like kind of like online only kind of thing. And what I discovered is that like Clocktower became just a what's the word I'm looking for? Clocktower became a mechanism for the social interaction. It wasn't about the game of Clocktower. It was like these are people that are just having fun, getting to know each other, asking each other questions, just kind of hanging out and like doing the kind of things that you do at parties and social gatherings with like this loose framework of a game of Clocktower around it. And like that to me is the essence of this game. It is a
Mhm.
thing that allows people, and that was really what it was originally designed for. It was a party game. It was for parties, those things that people used to throw before COVID happened. And parties were a big part of like just these are things that you can do at a party game. And I think that that was a really good part of it that I think sometimes got a little bit lost because of the transition to online and all of that kind of stuff, which
Mhm.
again, I'm very thankful for, but I don't know. There's something really magical about just having a group of people who are kind of like we don't really know much about each other, but we know enough that we kind of have this shared language and we can kind of speak to each other in this shared language and use that to facilitate interactions between two human beings. And I love that. And I think that that was, that's the kind of thing that is can very easily be missed and overlooked when, you're playing with either your own experienced play group already or your group of friends and everybody's a regular. New people are really the lifeblood of it, and
Mhm.
it's so great to see more and more people just coming into the game.
I love having a, even if it's not even a new player, just having a new person that isn't used to your
Yeah,
group coming in, because everybody has sort of an established meta, and it can somewhat get stale, and then you get somebody else new, and they're like, okay, well this person's doing something that we've never seen before, or we don't know how to interact with it, and it's always fun. With Final Three Con, I always say, I said this when I went to the first one 2 years ago, and it was the same thing this year when I got to go. No matter where you went, you could just walk up to somebody, or sit next to somebody, and you just already had something in common, and it just made it that not. I'm not a very outgoing person, I guess, but to know you can just kind of sit next to somebody and you already have some kind of connection that has that start. I also thought it's funny, and this especially true because we were like me and Nina and some others were there Wednesday night, so we were there real early this year, and it's a business hotel. So Wednesday night and Thursday night, you have all these people talking about this. We're lounging around in shorts, talking about executions and Sarah Novices and madness, and meanwhile you have people in suits walking by, and I imagine each group's kind of looking at each other kind of strange. I
yep,
I saw a bunch of like older gentlemen. I'm going to guess they're probably like doctors or something talking about golfing, and I imagine I'm looking at them like they're looking at us.
yeah. I mean, it's like you see someone talking about like their handicap and their par, and you're just like, what language are you speaking? That's how people look at us, and that's perfectly fine. I always say it's one
Yeah.
of those things that like 50%, actually more than 50% of any sentences that you say during a game of Clock Tower should not be said on an airplane. Basically, like
Oh
that's
my goodness,
that's the kind of situation that we're in.
I have the best example of
I
this
love that.
at
Yeah.
at my local con last year. We get a bunch of like younger kids who will play in the games, and this one game just happened to have like one of the kids was the demon, and another one I think was like the baron, and one of the good players, and he's about my age, so like in his like 40s or whatever. He goes, I hate to say this, but I think we need to kill the kids. And it was just one of those moments where it's like, yeah, he just said that, and it made sense in the game,
You have to
but
step
it's
back.
it's still a
You have to
sentence of all time.
you still have to step back and just be like, that was a sentence that came out of my mouth.
You have to kill
Yep.
the kids.
We have to kill the kids.
And now YouTube's going to flag this video.
I'm so sorry, YouTube. Nina will get it. It's fine. It's fine.
No, that's fine. It's not monetized anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah, I know.
What was your? So, did you play in person first? I think you said you did play in person first. So,
Yeah.
for you, what are the kind of differences between playing in person versus online? I know we kind of already mentioned it, but
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one is just facial interaction and body language. I know you had your a person. If you ever, I mean, I'll shorten the answer on this because I know May went over this a lot more in detail about that because but it really does make a difference to be able to just get body language, to be able to kind of just see that interaction. A lot of my training professionally in my lines of work that I've had, the careers that I've had over my time, have been stuff that has been dependent and sometimes necessary to be able to quickly get a gauge of the assessment of a person based on their body language rather than the words that they say. Um, and I'm not saying that like it transitions the same because not every person that I was interacting with is purposefully trying to lie to me like they would in Clocktower, but there you have to make an assessment quick is basically what it is. And not everybody that plays these or that I had to interact with professionally was a seasoned liar from playing hundreds of games of Clocktower. But I do think that the best part of this is that when you are in person, there is like a there is an added element to the game in terms of there's an added element to the game when it comes to things like um, the simplest way I could phrase it, just vibes. Like the simplest explanation is just that when you're with a person, you might find that you have like a nervous player and you're just like, oh, okay, I'm kind of like, I don't want to read into it, but you're probably evil. But you get a sense too of just like you meet a person and they seem super confident in their information and the things that they're telling you. And you're just like, why are you so confident? Like haven't you played enough of this game to know that you should never be confident in your information? But it's really funny because there's so much that you can just pick up from like these little tiny little micro interactions and like facial tics and things like that that even a camera doesn't pick up. Like and just how do I sit about my chair? How relaxed am I? And it also helps with being able to assess the situation. If you have players that unfortunately are checked out or having a rougher time,
yeah,
maybe you can kind of address them with a little bit more intimacy and a little bit more subtlety than you would on an online game because you're online, everybody knows who you're talking to. You can't really hide it. So if you kind of just sneak by and make like a little comment, that's one thing. You can do little visual signals. Like we played a game at the con with Nick from GS, and he was my ogre. I was his friend, and I told him I was good the entire game, and then I was just trying to figure out what was going on because something just seemed weird, and I just wanted to kind of know like, is this real? Like, are you actually my ogre? And I just made a very subtle hand gesture to him, like I took a script, and I just kind of covered my hand, and I went Nick, and I went like this, and I was like, hmm. Just to kind of indicate that I was evil very subtly. And he was just like, you should, he was just like, and what I was trying to do is basically just gauge the look on his face and just see like the reaction to actually you're evil.
mm-hmm.
How do you react to that? That is not a thing. You could never accomplish that online.
I love that. Yeah,
And there's so many of those little tiny interactions that you can use online to be able to help with those things.
yeah, and Final 3 Con obviously this year wasn't my first time playing in person, but
Yeah, of course.
how much I get to play in person is pretty limited. But what it really drove home to me is how much the space that you're in, the physical space, um, shapes the game and the context.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you and I played in a game that the game is only which the game is designed to only play in a circle, like just
Yeah,
a circle, and then this room is the circle. You're like there's
correct.
if you're outside the circle, you're where the storyteller is.
Yeah.
So I played a different game in there. I think I talked about this on here recently, but I like bringing it up. I was an evil traveler. My demon was 2 seats away from me. Vigor Mortis is the only demon on the script. It took me several days before I could really conveniently slide over and let him know, hey, I know you're my demon. And finally, when I did, he he's like, he gave me a nod. He's like, okay, well, I'm the Alcy here, uh, and I'm vigor poisoned, which was his way of telling me that uh, Alcy here's his bluff,
Yep.
and the guy sitting between us that he killed at night is a minion,
Which
and
means,
which
yeah,
would quote unquote make him vigor poison. It was like
right.
a very subtle way to just like let me know that, and that's the day before I tried to tell him that I was the evil traveler, but right when I kind of slid over to him, some people came up and it's like I was a harlot. So like, oh hey, what did you do last night? And I was like, well, now I can't tell them, and I don't know. I think that's fascinating. I love the physical space and how much it shapes the game for in-person clock tower.
And there's a lot of people who are purists that say that that's really the only way to play, and like I get that. Like there, it's everybody's got their preferences. Like I totally understand. I mean, I do think that there's a lot of value to playing online. I
Mm-hmm.
do think there's a lot of value to using the app or just playing on, I don't know, roll d20 or whatever it was. You know, like whatever method it is that you play on. Like there is a general benefit, because that's the other thing too, is that there's obviously limitations in terms of travel and stuff like that for players to be able to go to
Yeah,
conventions and things like that. But there's also limitations, like, again, this was a thing that, we are now thankfully at a point, because I'm from Connecticut, in case that wasn't clear. And in the pre-pandemic days, and even in the the post-pandemic years, finding a play group, finding people who are willing to play this game that they've never heard of before, especially before it was even released, it was impossible. It was
mm-hmm.
just like you grinded so hard to just try to find people in your area who might even be remotely interested in trying to play this thing. And it was like pulling teeth. Now, thankfully, we have an established community now. We have a consistent game group and here in Connecticut, and it's great. But it took literally half a decade to do. There are people who still live in certain parts of the country, the world, that are in a more remote area that don't have access to being able to have a consistent play group. Or there's people who have, for various reasons, anxiety or limitations about being in certain spaces with other people to play Clocktower. Online exists to be able to give those people an ingress into the game, and it gives more
Yeah,
accessibility. And there are, so, yes, I understand the experience in person, if you are willing to and able to engage in it, I do find far superior. But that doesn't mean that online is not a very valuable tool for a vast number of players.
yeah. Something I bring up here often is I have at least like three regulars from the UK who join my games, and I do my games at 9 o'clock at night, my time, Eastern time. So that means, and they go till like 1:30 a.m. So that means they're for their time playing till about 6 a.m. in the morning to play my games. I got another guy right now. He plays from Australia. It's get to experience these people from all around the world, and yeah, it's,
Yep.
as great as in person is, and quite frankly, is a better game. The online game is still just fantastic and provides so many opportunities.
Yeah,
Also, it's just so much easier to run a game.
it is. Yeah. Yeah.
I mentioned running two Trouble Brewings and then switching to S&V. S&V and BMR both have like so many reminder tokens.
Yes, they do.
And then I immediately switched back to Trouble Brewing. So, if that was online, that would have been a few clicks of the button, and then we'd be done.
But alas, that was not to be.
Yeah, but yeah, I still do love online play. Yeah, I always tell people online. This made it my favorite game of all time, easily, hands down, no question. Then in person's even better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like
I mean,
if in person's a 10, I think a recent interview I had, he was saying, if in person's a 10 and online's not as good, but it's still like a 9.8.
yeah, exactly. Right. You do lose some things, but you gain a lot too. So, I think I would always rather people feel like they are able to be included rather than excluded. And if that means giving up some of the advantages of playing in person, who are we to say? You know, I mean, that's on the if we have the ability to provide those things for players, we absolutely should.
Yeah, and I mean, if I only played in person, I'd probably have, I don't know, maybe 2 dozen games under my belt.
Right, right.
So yeah. All right. So when you sit down for a game, online or in person, you're about to draw your token. Do you hope your token's blue or red?
It depends on the day. Um, I will say so. There's like the ranking quiz of like if I between these
All right.
two things, what do you get? And you do that like 1,000 times. Um, the last time I did it, like I'd say 18 out of the 20 were red. Um, but it was because I think that there's just there is a very big rush that you get from winning as evil that you
I've said
really
that
just
many times. Yeah.
you just don't get it when you win as good. I mean, you do sometimes when the odds are completely stacked against you. Um, one of the biggest one of the biggest times that happens, and this is a thing that pretty much most players will go through, is your first Legion game. When you are a good player in a Legion game, if it's your first time doing it, it is actually terrifying because you're just like, wait, we don't have a numbers advantage. Oh my god, everyone's against me. What is going on? And it flips the script on Clocktower so much.
Mhm.
And like your first Legion game is generally very terrifying as good, but if you do manage to win it, um, it's it's really exciting because it is literally just the embodiment of like the zombie apocalypse film. Like it just you get that rush of just like we beat the zombie horde, so to speak. But when you win as evil, like the game is supposed to be balanced for both teams, but just simply by sheer numbers advantage, it's a lot easier because you do also have that sense of unity too. You know, if it's not like a magician poppy grower game, but like if it's a normal game, you as the evil team, you know who each other are, you trust each other implicitly, you have a shared goal, you have the team straight up, right? With good, you know that some of the people that you're working with are good. You know that some of the people that you're working with are evil, but you don't quite know. And unless the game is incredibly solved, you'll probably not know until the curtain reveal completely. With evil, it's almost like you're thrown into like this kind of impossible position, and you're just like, there's three of us, there's nine of them, or whatever it is, and I just have to. We have to make it work, and we've got very powerful abilities, but all it takes is the one of us to die, and we lose. So you know, uh, I will say my tune has changed a lot recently. I mean, I always loved playing minions, but I used to also love playing demons a lot more. The more I've started to play as demon, though, I personally have just really started to. I take that hit really heavily personally, just kind of the person that I am. When because you're not disposable. With a
Hmm.
minion, you're generally a disposable player, and when you're a townsfolk or an outsider, you're generally a disposable player. You're indispensable as the demon most times. And if you kind of have to be the leader of your team most of the time, you have to shoulder a lot of the responsibility, and it sucks when you lose. It does. So, um, and I think that's an interesting thing about that brings up an interesting conversation about just kind of knowing your mental limits and just kind of knowing what you can and can't do. There are people who do not play in Legion games. There are people who don't play in Atheist games. There are people who don't play in Poppy Grower games. They just
Right.
don't. They don't like them. Recognizing your limits is really important. And unfortunately, saying I don't ever want to be a demon is impossible. But you do what you can. Um, but I do think that that's a big part of it too. Is just like if I'm gonna pull a token, I generally enjoy the chillness of being blue and solving the puzzle. But there really is just it's unlike anything else when you pull off an evil win against all odds. There's just nothing else like it.
I do have a video on my channel, my first online game, which I not exactly correctly, but kind of generally think of as my first game, and it was a imp win for Treble Brewing, and man, that was a high I rode for like a week.
Absolutely, of course. It's amazing. There's nothing like it. I mean, there's really nothing like it in gaming, if you ask me.
Yeah, yeah. So whenever I play a game, I always try to make sure that when I don't play very often. I usually storytell, but when I do play, I always make sure that I'm in a headspace where my drawing demon token, really an evil token in general, is my least favorite. But I try to make sure I'm in a headspace where if I draw a demon token, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And on the TPI stream, I've had some pretty high profile losses as
Yep.
as a demon or as a summoner who on its debut got executed day two. So
Oh, I
that
remember that.
yeah,
I'm sorry, I do remember that.
no, it's all right. No, I won't say it didn't weigh on me at all, but it was pretty. It was a pretty good kind of like understanding that balance. Like, okay, it's just something that happens sometimes. It's not my fault, you know. It's a does it suck? Yeah, but it happens. And sometimes it happens when they're trying to show off a brand new character, and it doesn't work.
There have been some questionable character reveal games, in the past. Games that have just gone very sideways very quickly. It happens. It's Clocktower. These things happen.
Yeah, something I will say though, I'm a big fan of allowing travelers in games, um,
Yeah.
because I, my games are kind of in a place, with the app, and I have a particularly good group. I can usually run any player count that for as many people that sign up. So I don't mind running travelers for that reason. But sometimes I'll just have people who are like, "Hey, I had a rough day,"
Yeah.
or maybe the first game was like they were the demon and it's very stressful, or they were good and they were the frame.
Yeah.
Nobody did anything wrong. They weren't upset about it, but like, what, that was stressful. I still want to play, but I want less responsibility. Can I travel? And my answer is, without question,
Yeah.
always yes.
Yeah.
And I love travelers for that reason.
Yeah. The maximum ability, minimum responsibility.
Yeah,
It's that is just again, another mechanism that just really separates the game from other games. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And some people don't like seeing travelers in for the entire game, but I don't mind. Uh, I think people overestimate how much it imbalances the game. Yeah, it has an effect on the balance, but I think people overestimate it, and more importantly, it allows somebody to play where they wouldn't otherwise. So, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. It's about increasing inclusivity and all of that. It's also about, I mean, yeah, game balance is an important thing. I mean, I know Navy and I have a reputation for being very, I don't want to say draconian, but like very strict about making sure that the games that we play, by and large, are scripts that we feel are pretty well balanced, and we try to run as balanced of games as possible.
yeah,
We purposefully don't try to do like a ton of wild zany stuff. We try to kind of keep it, that these are, whatever. That's kind of the reputation that we have. But like the that doesn't mean necessarily that a traveler is necessarily going to like completely imbalance the game. I mean, if you do it right,
hmm
a traveler ability can fit into a game just fine. And again, it allows a player to play that normally wouldn't be able to play.
yeah. And and I appreciate you and Navian as storytellers a lot. My introduction to Navian really was me and them would answer questions at the same time on the unofficial, and they would almost be the exact same answer. And it was
Yep.
like, oh, hey, beat you to it. And
And sure enough, that whatever the answer was, it was just like, God, yeah, they really got it, don't they? They totally have the right answer. And it's just, and again, I spend a ton of time with Navian. Like we do a bunch of stuff together, but it goes without question that like they are, in my mind, I mean, if not the second best of storytellers that there are out there. And I think that a lot of it comes from just absolute dedication and experience to not just the game itself, but also for understanding the corner cases and understanding the nuances of like, this is a thing that, situational awareness, I guess is the way that I would say it, is that
mhm.
if there is yes, you can do this, you can also do this, but you probably should do this because XYZ and all of the other mitigating factors that you haven't considered yet. And those kinds of things, I think, are a skill that a lot of seasoned but not like expert level clock tower storytellers can very easily miss out on. And I think that that's one of those things that and it's growing, but we have like a good sizable sample size of just like people who are just really good at this whole storytelling thing, and people that are good about being able to make decisions on the fly. I mean, again, streaming is part of it too. I mean, like, when you're playing a game, when you're streaming a game and you're storytelling, you do have to make decisions on the fly.
Mhm. Yeah.
And from games that I've seen, both on hard claim or back in the Viva La Sam '05 days, like we would see instances of like, decision has to be made. There's really no good answer, but I have to make a decision and I have to make it fast and I have to understand the repercussions of either side of it. And there's like, usually like 5 to 10 mitigating factors that change whether or not you're going to make the decision one way or the other and figure out what you have to do with your storyteller fiat. There's a very small percentage of people, yourself included, that like make that know how to read that situation and make the detailed analysis to be able to figure out what the best play is, not just for the game but for the player's experience. And I
Yeah.
think that a really that is a really hard thing for storytellers to figure out. And unfortunately, usually a lot of it comes from making the wrong call and recognizing the repercussions of it. And you only learn from experience, so to speak. And I think that it's a tough lesson to learn, but it's a very important one if you want to level up to becoming a great storyteller. And I think that we have a growing ranks now of just great storytellers in the community.
Absolutely, I think that's the reason why BMR is. I feel like it's gotten more popular over the years because that's an easy script to run bad, and
Mm-hmm.
people. I've talked to a lot of people who have kind of come around on it. Talking about the storyteller thing. Even I guess even really more important than understanding the rules is understanding the players. And
Yes.
like if you're running a game with the players like the player fun in mind, which hopefully all storytellers are. I know not all are doing that, unfortunately. And you're already like a step above a lot of storytellers out there, unfortunately.
Yeah. Um, Everyone has had the bad experience, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Everyone has had the game in which they say, I just don't want to play with that storyteller anymore. And it sucks because it's really tough to it's nice to give people clemency and give them grace and give them a second chance. But like this game gets in your head, man. Like this game does get in your head as a player. And if you have a bad trip, so to speak, it's really hard to want to come back to that. And that's part of the responsibility of a storyteller is to not just be the facilitator of the game, but the facilitator of the experience. And that's a really tough thing for newer storytellers, but also for newer players because you're forsaking your trust in the experience to this one person. And this is where I see a lot of storytellers that are mostly um, uh, specialized in new player experience. And I've seen a lot of those recently, and I've seen a lot of storytellers that like prefer to teach the game rather than storytell for their preferred play group or for seasoned players, experienced players, crazy custom scripts. Some people just really enjoy the experience of using the game for new players as a mechanism for teaching the game. And I've seen a lot of that lately, and that's really encouraging, I think.
Yeah. And then from a player perspective, hopefully you are being kind to your storytellers and realizing that they do sometimes have difficult decisions to make. They can think it through for 5 minutes, but at the end of the day, sometimes you just don't know how it's going to play out. You can just kind of make guesses. Um, I'd say probably at least once a session when doing my streams. I think back on decisions like, you know what, in hindsight, wish I'd done
Yep.
this other thing. But, hopefully, you don't let it eat you up too much. And part of that is having players who understand and, like, okay, yeah, that's cool. It was still fun. It still worked out.
And I think that if you make a mistake, which is the case with anything in life, if you make a mistake and you dwell on it in a vacuum, you're not going to learn from it. If you take a mistake and you play it back in your head and you ask yourself, this is just a common thing. And I was actually just having a conversation with a friend of mine about this recently, about results oriented thinking and how if you are a storyteller and let's just say you said, I don't know, a mare bounce, perfect example, right? Getting near the end of the game, demon targets the mare. You could bounce it off of the mare, or you could let the mare die. That is your decision as a storyteller. If you take all of the information that you have from what you've learned from your players, from what you've heard from your players, you make that choice and you say, I'm letting that mare die. I'm not bouncing it. And you say that's the right play because if they don't kill the mare now, they're going to go to final three and they will go to the mare win because the mare is trusted. and then good is going to win, and evil's not going to have a chance. This is evil's chance to get back in the game, to kill the mayor. We have to let the mayor die, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then you make that decision using all the correct information that you could possibly gather throughout the game, and you say that was the correct play as a storyteller, the correct call to make to do that. Then you go to the game, and then for something that you didn't even know about, or a worldview that was going around that you just didn't hear, the mayor dying says, oh, actually, yeah, if the mayor died, then that means XYZ. And then the guy who is the demon is actually just the demon. And then they kill the demon anyway. Like, you didn't make the wrong call. Like, yes, you were trying to help the evil team. The intent was to help the evil team. What you did actually ended up backfiring and hurting the evil team more than what you thought it would. But the result doesn't matter. It was the thought process. It was what you decided to put into the decision making to try to balance the game and make the experience better for players. So at the end of the game, if evil feels slighted, you can explain to them, I made the right decision I thought I made the right decision in the moment based on what I knew. I did not realize that if you did blah, 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 that comes back and you get executed. These things happen, right? These things do happen. But the important thing is, as a storyteller, you don't take that and say, I'm never storytelling again. I made a mistake. I don't want to ruin the experience for my players. No, you made the right call
Mm-hmm.
with what you knew. Don't focus on the result. Focus on making the right decision in the moment. That's a learning experience. And I think that it's really easy to get discouraged and to feel rejected because you did a thing that made someone upset. But you have to recognize your own limitations, and you have to understand that you have things that you have to be able to do, and you're going to make the right call with the right information. If you go into making decisions in general in life using the information that you have and trying to make the best decision based on that, regardless of what the result is, you're probably going to get a really good and a good rate on good results most of the time. Probably a better rate than if you just focused on the mistakes that you made.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really important lesson that I think a lot of people could stand to learn, especially as storytellers.
I think it kind of ties into that idea that this game's very replayable because
Yeah.
if you take that hypothetical situation and not I'm not even saying like make a different decision, making that exact same decision, there's a dozen different ways that conversation, like if you could do it over and did the exact same thing, that there's a dozen other ways that conversation for town could go that maybe leads to the demon getting executed for a different reason, or maybe it leads to somebody else getting executed, or there's you just never know.
Right, and I think that, and it's honestly just a really good lesson for life in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
That analog, that parallel is just there. It's, I don't know. Am I in the right relationship? Should I get a new job? Like, should I don't know, buy a new house or some other major decision? You know, these decisions, if you're making them in life and you're making them with the correct information and you're looking at it from an analytical point of view of saying, I know 500 things about this thing, and I'm taking all those 500 things and I'm distilling it down and I'm saying this is the right choice based on what I see right in front of me. If you go into life making decisions like that, you will be better off than if you focus on just what the result of the decision was. It's a really good lesson to learn, and I think that it's a really important thing for players and just really anyone to really get.
I feel like I have a real life example that has nothing to do with Clocktower, but maybe this makes sense for the conversation.
Yeah.
When we bought, you mentioned buying a house. When we bought this house, we knew it was going to need a new roof.
Right, of
So
course.
within about a year, we got our roof redone. We researched companies, try to find what we thought was a reputable company. Did it, got a roof done. Turns out we've had no problems with it. But also recently, that company has gone under or basically gone silent because apparently they're actually a pretty shady company who we just so happened to got like good service out of. So like
Okay.
but if it had gone wrong, we still did what we could have at the time,
Yeah.
and it would suck if it had gone bad. But like I don't know, at the
No,
end of the day,
it's a really good
you can't
example.
control how things turn out always. You just can't know.
Yeah, there are always more variables that you won't know. No
Yeah,
one's a
yeah.
supercomputer. You're never going to be able to figure all that out. So
All right, Clock Tower. Back to Clock Tower.
yeah.
I like talking about some of the characters you like. You mentioned Pit Hag's your favorite. What do you enjoy so much about Pit Hag? Especially on S&V, but on customs as well.
No, I actually think S&V is the perfect home for Pit Hag. I think that it like literally I built this script to be a love letter to the Pit Hag. and it still is not its ideal environment. Its ideal environment is SNV. And what I love about the Pit Hag, I think, is that one of them is that it has a unique effect on the game. It does something that no one else does. It's not like a noble or like a chef and a shugenja, like or a clockmaker. They've kind of exist in similar realms, um, and there's overlap. Let's say there's overlap between those characters. Pithag just does something that no one else does, and that's a really fun thing. That's a really, you it's the player experience. Of if I'm washerwoman and I'm investigator and I'm librarian, plays out mostly the same. Minor little detail differences here, but you play them basically the same, especially on their home script. With Pit Hag, you get it's almost like a critical hit. You know,
Hmm.
pull the Pit Hag to okay, okay, I can do things with this. I have power here. This is a really fun thing to do. Um, and I think that that's kind of like a World's Your Oyster kind of moment where you get the Pit Hag token and you're just like, I have so many things I can do. And it just opens up a whole book of possibility. And I love characters like that. I love characters that let you do creative and iterative things with them. Now, I'm not saying you can't do that with top four roles in TB because you can, but there are limitations. There's just simply less limitations with characters like Pit Hag. Like Al Hadikia is another one that I actually adore playing. I love playing Al Hadikia because, um, especially I actually really like the change in Al Hadikia. I like the
Oh
idea
yeah.
of yeah, I think that makes a big difference. But um, when you make kills, you can do some really wild choices, and of course resurrections as well. But I don't know. When a character opens up a new line of play for you, that's really exciting. You know, um, I think that with characters that can do, um, like, and again, like I know, like I told you, like my top 20 characters or whatever they were characters that are mostly evil because of the power that they have. But also in that space were Heretic and Damsel. And you might be like, why? You can't do anything with those characters. They literally do nothing. And it's just like, no, you have crazy information with those characters. Like you have amazing information, but it comes at a cost. And you have to balance the cost. And you have to balance how you're going to utilize that information to be able to change the game. And I think that that's where, like, if I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to do something, I feel like there is a lot that can be done. Um, I think that when you have an impact on the game and it allows you to be able to change your social plays based on that impact of the game, I think that's really exciting. And I think I would like to see more characters like that available.
I think the mechanical power is just like a lot of fun. For SMV, I think both Pithag and Serenovus. Uh,
Yeah.
in terms of what the Pithag can actually do, maybe in my opinion, it might be just like slightly overrated. But in terms of like pure fun, it's like
Yeah.
just so fun. Honestly, I don't know if I've actually been the Pithag. Come to think of it, I have been the Serenovus, which I feel like does something similar, at least for my taste, in that you get to choose a player and you basically do something to them. Like in Pithag, you're mechanically changing their character. Sarah Novus, you're saying, "Hey, you need to be claiming this," and there's just something like oddly fun about it. Yeah, and I guess it's kind of something about Clocktower in general is that all this is occurring within a safe space. Of course, the general concept of lying
Right.
to people, it's all within the confines of the game, and then killing people as a demon, kind of the same thing. Pit Hag Serenovus, I feel like fall in that. You mentioned, I think it was Poe. Oh, no, I think you mentioned Al Hadikia. I was thinking Poe for
Right.
the same reason.
Yeah.
People love those characters because kills. You get to do like a
Options.
lot of kills.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned that. I'm getting off on a tangent again, but it actually does relate to Clock Tower. The lying within space thing. There's a really quick story about that. We were playing a game at the con with another player, and I said something that was kind of meant to just kind of be kind of silly funny, and this other person also said something that was kind of silly funny back to me, and we were just kind of vibing and going off of each other, and and all of that, and just kind of lying to each other about something, and then like later through the game, we came up to each other and we were trying to figure out what was going on with the game because we were trying to figure out if we can trust each other because it ended up being a Legion game. And we ended up talking to each other about something. And I was like, they said something along the lines of like, well, no, you actually did this on day one. And it's about how they interpreted the things that I had said in that silly moment. And I was like, hold on, hold on, hold on. Take a step back out of the game for a second. Okay. When I said this, I meant this. And I don't want you to get the false impression that I meant something different. And, you know, something that could have potentially been uncomfortable is what it came down to. And we basically had to just kind of take a moment of, we lied to each other in the game, but the lie that we told each other could have potentially had impacts in how we interact with each other outside of the game. So we stopped and we said, no, hang on. Let's clarify. I'm lying to you in the game because of this. Well, I didn't say that, but I said this in the game to you because of the context of the game. It does not have to do with everything else. And that moment of being able to kind of differentiate and step back and divorce the two things of, you are my friend and I trust you and I'm going to tell you things, and then you're in this game and you may be evil, so I'm going to lie to the hell out of you, right? You know, those are two different things, but in the context of the game they could potentially overlap and cause issues.
Mm-hmm.
So the increase in ability to communicate with players is a really big important part with that. And I love that idea of like, I'm going to lie to you and I'm going to poison you and I'm going to kill you, but you're my best friend. Like, you know, I love you and I'm going to hang out with you, but like, I'm also going to kill you. And it's that dichotomy is just like, it's one of the best parts of this game.
In a recent discussion, we talked about the psychopaths kind of the same way, where
Yeah.
you're not only killing them, but you're doing it to their face, basically.
Right. Publicly.
Yeah. And this might be a good time to plug the once again from Final 3 Con, a panel. What was it? I think it was called what was it? The social impact of social deduction or something like that.
Yes. The
Ed,
social
Milk, and
impact of
Noor.
deception, I believe it is.
Yeah. Really good chat. I recommend it's on the Final 3 Con channel, so I recommend people watching it. It touches a lot of these topics.
Yeah.
They go for over an hour on that topic. So it's a really cool part about the game. Just the social construct of it. And again, good example of, okay, sometimes you might need to step out of it just to make sure everything's clear and okay, and then you can kind of step back into that construct and get to killing again and lying.
Yeah, exactly. And lying and killing is fine in context, not so much outside of context.
Yeah.
You know, I keep on getting distracted with the tangents. I'm sorry. You keep on asking these really good questions, man. You know.
Oh, you're fine. I have a good. I feel like a good segue. Speaking of lying, something I like asking about. I mentioned Sarah Novus. Madness is a fun topic to bring up. So, how do you feel about madness in this game?
Oh, I love it. I love madness. It's another one of those things that like, so technically madness was kind of just supposed to be introduced as like a SNV thing, you know, kind of supposed to be like your introduction to madness is this, but as we know, madness exists outside of that ecosystem. Um, I personally love madness. I think that it is one of those really kind of outside of the box ways of basically if you're designing game components for a game, it's like what you're trying to achieve as a game designer is a role that forces players to lose credibility is really what it comes down to. Like as a game designer, if I'm designing S&V, I'm like, I need a character that makes these incredibly powerful info rolls on this script less credible and more suspicious to their fellow good players. How do I do that? Well, you can poison them, sure. That's cool too, because then their information is not reliable. But it's not just the information that needs to be suspect. It's the player themselves and the role and the claim that they're making about their information that needs to be suspect. And if anybody's ever played a big S&V in-person game, if there's a Serenovus going around and a mutant going around, or like a Vigor killed Serenovus, God forbid, and people are just claiming wild stuff all over the place just to mess with worldviews, it may not be as big of an issue online because of limited communication, but in person, it's crazy. Like the worldviews and the solves you have to make to try to account for madness is really tough. But you can be really creative with madness too. You know, you can do fun things. I was harpy mad in a game to be mad that a player was evil. So I could just say, I got an evil ping on that player or whatever. Instead, I said, actually, I'm the alchemist wizard, and I wish that this person became an evil minion. Technically, I'm fulfilling madness.
Hmm.
I'm saying that they're evil. I made them evil, but they're evil. You can do fun stuff with madness. You don't have to be so rigid. You can do really creative things with it just to be able to fulfill the conditions of it. And I think that that's the really fun part about it, is that it also, it is a limit. It's somehow a limitation on a player's experience, but the kind of limitation that breeds innovation. In that, I have to be publicly out that I am the sage. I have to pretend that I'm the sage, act like I'm a sage. Well, now that I know that I have this very narrow band of behaviors that I can exhibit, I don't have to worry about everything else that's over here and try to come up with like one of 500,000 different possible plays to come up with. And I've got like 500 plays I can come up with.
Hmm.
I can work with that. I can come up with something a little bit, I think it's really great. I think it's a great mechanic. I think it was probably one of the best choices of mechanics that was added to the game.
Very unique for the game, and S&B is a great place to introduce it. I always think that context is really how people should be thinking about Madness, especially
Mhm.
once you start moving on to things like Harpy, because S&B, the whole idea of it, and how much this plays out in practice, especially online, might be debatable. But the whole idea about it is it's an overload of information. It's a lot of
Yeah.
information. It's supposed to be hard to sort through, but you're expecting to be trying to sort through it, which means people, again, we have metas where people are doing 3 for 3s and lying about their info for to like final three or whatever. But the game expects you to be like putting out your information and trying to share it.
Eventually.
Yeah, sooner or later. Some people should be doing it on day one. Some people should be holding on to it and then doing it a little bit later. At some point, it shouldn't be unusual to be putting out information. So if you're Sarah Novus man as a town crier, you should probably be putting out information on yeses or nos based on who voted yesterday.
Probably.
Um, if you're Mad as the Snake Charmer, you should probably be talking about who you've picked throughout the game and who's not demon or in your fake world. If you're the mutant, you're probably just claiming any townsfolk. You get to
Right.
kind of like Sarah Novus, except you get to choose what townsfolk you claim,
Right.
and you should probably be putting out misinformation.
You
Um,
could also claim being a minion or a demon, just FYI, or traveler.
Certainly possible. But then that can become a meta potentially, and then that's just a
Yeah.
way to hint that you're mutant. It's very context based, of course,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a good point for Magnet. It's a good starting place for Madness to kind of explain what Madness is meant to do. So now when you move on, like say Harpy or Pixie, now you have this like. I mean, I think you gave just a great example of a good way to do Harpy Madness. Make it something up. If you're just saying, "Well, I think he's evil. He's got an evil ping," or worse yet, "Oh, I nominate you. I think you're evil." But y'all don't have to vote on this. Like that,
Very
that's that,
convincing.
that's not madness. That's token madness. That's like doing the bare minimum.
And I
Um,
do think
yeah.
that storytellers in general, and Navian is probably going to just applaud with their wings when they hear this, but storytellers need to be more strict about executing to Sarah Novus and killing on Harpy Madness. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
if you don't take advantage of it, then it's not a towns, it's not a minion. Like a Sarah Novus and a Harpy are supposed to not only overload the game with information or change worldviews and stuff like that, but they have to get results sometimes too. A Sarah Novus Madness sometimes should execute someone.
Yeah.
Like, be more strict about this kind of thing, because yes, it solves the world that there's a Sarah Novus in the game. That's not the end of the world. That's not going to tank the evil team.
Especially since
There are
SMV is meant
situations
to
in
have
which it
loud
will, but probably
minions,
not.
right?
Right.
Like it's fine.
Right. So yeah,
Uh,
I think that storytellers need to be a little bit more bloodthirsty when it comes to madness.
yeah, I started to think that even with mutant, there's kind of this concept of, well, if they out day one and you execute them, you're just kind of confirming them as mutant and that they're good. Even though I have seen Sarah Novices do that play as a Sarah Novus, make themselves mad at something else, claim mutant, get executed, blah blah blah.
Right.
I started to think that maybe that. I mean, yes, it confirms them, but like also towns losing nominations and discussions.
Right.
Contextually, it's probably not as bad as really people think to
Yeah.
just execute a mutant. Yeah.
I had a for a little while on one of the homebrew scripts that I was working on. I had a pair of characters that were kind of an analog to a Sarah Novus and a mutant, an outsider and a minion. And their ability wasn't that they caused executions, but that they just cause premature day ends. So like if the person, if the outsider didn't fulfill a certain requirement, then the storyteller would just be like, everybody come back to the town square. We're going to bed. No executions, no discussions, no nothing. And there were obviously play issues with inclusivity and all that kind of stuff and whatever, but the idea was basically the same of that is valuable to the good team. It's valuable to the evil team, but it's really valuable to the good team. That time for being able to make the decision about who to kill and to even talk about who to kill publicly, that's valuable. And not having that is a penalty. So yes, executing a mutant on day one, okay, sure, you have an outsider confirmed. You have an outsider confirmed, a good player confirmed. Cool, that's cool. You lost a whole day's worth of execution and discussion.
And especially if you're running the game at a brisk pace, which I have
Yeah,
talked about a lot recently, because
yeah,
because as I think many people agree with now, many people run this game way too slow.
yeah.
So yeah. I have a quick side story that I just thought of that it kind of goes back to the whole storyteller thing and making sure you're doing what's fun for the player. Because I had a situation where I could have done something that would have been mechanically hilarious, but very obviously not fun for the player, so I didn't do it. But
Right.
I had a player, he was a mutant. This was a custom script, but he was in a chat day one. He's like, I'm the mutant. I don't really feel like doing mutant madness. He was chill about it, and but he was like, yeah, I don't really feel like doing mutant madness like this game, so I'm just going to claim mutant. So of course, going to execute him. But what could have been funny to me that I could have done but didn't, because obviously it would not have been fun for him, is that there's a pacifist in play. So the funny thing, mechanically, would have been to execute him and then not kill him. Obviously, it was like a intrusive thought. It's like, oh, what if I did this?
Yep.
No, we're not doing
Exactly.
that.
Yep. That's like
But
me every time I think about a recluse dying and having a Scarlet Woman catch it.
exactly,
Intrusive thought.
the yes,
Thankfully, Navy
the
comes
yes
out of
but
my head
don't,
every time. But yeah, it is a
the,
thing you can do.
the yes but don't.
Yes, but don't. Yes, but don't.
All right. Well, let's go on and get to our final question here that we always like to go. Got our Rochambeau script here and all these characters on it. Which of these characters would you like to be in real life?
I've actually thought about this question a lot. Okay. So Leviathan has its advantages. You are enormous. You are an eldritch horror of some kind. And as someone who frequently co-streams with an eldritch horror, it sounds pretty fun. But I actually think like the one that kind of like stands out to me specifically. Um, I had one answer. I'm actually going to go back on it. I actually do think that if it was in like real life, I'd probably rather be like an innkeeper. I feel like an innkeeper is like the kind of role that I would want to be. Like, that whole kind of like. I think I'm very protective of the people in my life, and I feel like the innkeeper just kind of speaks to me on that level as just someone who like just tries to keep people safe, keep people housed, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Now I feel like I want to know what your other answer is going to be.
Probably just a poisoner. Just a
Well, that was Navian's choice.
that was of course that was Navian's choice. The poisoner is Navian's favorite character. Like I don't know if like actually favorite, but like probably actually the favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been reasoning for it. They kind of reinterpret it more as like a potion concoction kind of
Yeah.
person. So yeah. All right. Well, before we go, is there anything you would like to plug?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously probably should plug the CTBOTC Discord server / Twitch channel / YouTube channel. Originally started by the amazing Harrison back in probably 2019, 2020, to just have local people in Connecticut play Clocktower and organize games in Connecticut. It has now grown to over 900 people that get together to play Clocktower and to discuss um, you know, uh, events that are based on things like inclusion and just supporting marginalized peoples and talking about the tall vampire lady from Resident Evil 8. Like we go over a lot of things. There's pretty comprehensive in our server. So We found a pretty good group of people that can get together that are like minded about both Clocktower, gaming, social justice, etc. And we just really like to kind of operate in our own little space, but one that is welcoming to everybody. And it doesn't matter if you're from Connecticut, doesn't matter from the U.S., doesn't matter anything. Just as long as you enjoy being with cool people that like to play games, then we have that. We have an open stream server, so or an open stream game. So if you want to join stream games, you can. And that's over at, I mean, you could do discord.gg/ctbotc or twitch.tv/ctbotc or YouTube, whatever the extension is, /ctbotc. So
And we'll put those links
definitely
in.
join us. Yeah, definitely join us. Make sure that, if you're just fans of gaming, Clock Tower, and just being cool human beings, then we would love to have you.
Yeah. I've been on that server for a while. Obviously, I've read a lot of great conversations on there over the years. Learned a lot. Great group of people. You all do stream offset of me, but you all came first, so I won't begrudge anybody watching watching you all.
I mean, we raid you all the time, so
Yeah, I always appreciate that, and I'm usually watching you all in the 45 minutes before my game starts. So.
Yeah, it's actually really good that we have that connection because I mean, again, if you guys are watching this, then you're obviously fans of Hard Claim, so like you probably already know this. But the Hard Claim channel also has a really great community of people who are invested not only in Clock Tower but also in each other, and it's one of the things that like if it is a really fortunate thing that every week when we stream and we finish our streams on Friday, we are able to throw to you guys because you share a lot of our same values and a lot of our same uh, passions for the game and for just each other or the wellness of your players. And it's I can think of very few places that I would rather raid into personally, no matter what the time zone is.
Yeah. Well, I always appreciate it when I was trying to become, I don't know, partner or affiliate, whatever the not the highest tier was. Those extra views helped a lot to, to get to that point a lot quicker. But yeah. All right. Well, Abby, thank you all. Thank you all. Let me try that again. All of y'all, thank you.
All of me. All of me.
Well, Habby, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Finally got to do it.
I'm so happy we finally got a chance to do it. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely. All right. And then thank you all for watching. We'll be back next week with another episode of Hard Claim.